Welcome to the Productive Introvert Community Podcast, helping ambitious introverts who feel deep down that they can add more value to the world to really thrive in their work. I'm Mariela Franker, and I'll be sharing what I'm learning as an introverted entrepreneur, a natural productivity coach, and a mom while I build my business online and take care of my family and myself. In this podcast, you'll learn the mindset and the practical steps to naturally increase the impact of your work while making space for your unique strengths as an introvert. Welcome to the Productive Introvert Community Podcast. I'm your host, Mariela Franker, and I started this podcast basically because a lot of people think that the words introvert and productive don't really belong in the same sentence. A lot of introverts feel like the things that feel natural to them, they don't really help them in their careers or help them to be strong leaders. We feel like if we could change things about our introverted nature, that would be the solution. And sometimes we also get well-meaning messages from the people around us that reinforce that belief. Things like, just come out of your shell a little. You just need to make sure that you're visible all the time. Or the only way to grow is to get out of your comfort zone. And that's a tricky one. We'll talk about that in a later episode. And my personal favorite, you're not assertive enough. Okay. So I've changed careers a couple of times and I've started over professionally a few times. When I started my coaching business, that was also around the time that we started a family. My son was about 1 year old at the time. So time management and productivity, it took on a whole other level, right? When you also have that wish to have a satisfying private life that you want to balance with your work. So one of the things that I've learned is that being introverted or extroverted is not the thing that makes or breaks whether or not you're good at what you do. And the way to move forward and to achieve your goals is to accept and lean into your natural process, the way that you naturally solve problems and your unique strengths. So this podcast is for introverted entrepreneurs who are already doing their best to make a difference in the world, but they feel deep down that they have more to offer. We're going to talk about the differences between the natural processes of introverts and extroverts. We'll talk about what leaning into your natural process and being naturally productive, what that really means, and the mindset and also the practical tools that you need to embrace that. When I started my coaching business, I was in the midst of the pandemic with a young family, and I run my business from home still today. So I'm going to share with you the lessons that I'm learning as an introverted entrepreneur, as a parent, and combining all the aspects of your life without stress or overwhelm, but with joy and with impact instead. I like to describe myself as a happy introvert, as an entrepreneur, and a mom. So I'm happily married. My husband is also an entrepreneur, and we've had a couple of other businesses in the past. Between the two of us, we run 3 businesses at the moment, and we successfully combine this with our family life. Most importantly, we don't work all the time. At the time that I'm recording this, my husband and I, we work about 24 hours a week on our businesses each. And I've done that from the start of my coaching business. The rest of our time is spent as a family and taking care of ourselves. We're both introverts, so we need a lot of quiet time and we make sure that we get that. But my life, our life, it wasn't always like this. So I've personally been through a lot of the things that many introverts struggle with. Doubting your own capabilities, overthinking, perfectionism, and being in jobs where you give it your all, but your contribution goes unnoticed. I'll share the things that helped me and that are helping my clients to basically to work less, but with more results, and the basis of that is to change the idea that your introverted nature is something that needs to be overcome, but instead start seeing it as the strength that it is. So I'm in no way a born entrepreneur or like a naturally gifted speaker. Although I got used to being on stages presenting as a scientist, I never really wanted to fly out on my own growing up. At every party, you'd find me, same place as always, sat next to my mom, listening to the adults talk while all the other kids were off playing together. And this kind of tickles me because it used to annoy me so badly. But the only two words that people used to describe me back then were shy and nice. Probably the two most generic and uninteresting words you could use to describe a person. I've overcome depression, burnout, health issues, and there was a time in my life that I worked nonstop and completely lost touch with myself. The things we're going to talk about in this podcast are simple in essence, but when you string them together, they have a huge impact. So your experience might not be exactly the same, but if I can come from those places and I was able to work my way over to where I am now, you can do something like that too. The aim for this podcast is to help you realize that productive and introvert, they do belong in the same sentence together. We are letting go of all the traditional ideas around productivity and all the hacks that 10x your output overnight. We don't all have to time block every 5 minutes of our life or to write 50-page business plans before we even take our first steps, or work from deadline to deadline feeling stressed all the time. Instead, we're going to start with you. Who are you? What do you want? What motivates you? What drives you to do the work that you do? We're going to understand your strength and your weaknesses too, but we're going to focus on strengths. We're going to get clear about your goals and which tiny little steps you can take next that will move you forward. So we're letting go of all the misconceptions around introverts, things that you may have heard and that you may have come to believe, but that are probably limiting you before you even get out of the starting blocks. So each episode of this podcast is going to be about 15 to 20 minutes. I'll share from my personal experiences from my clients, questions that I get from people, and, just life. Okay, so a little bit more about me. I'm a former scientist with a PhD in molecular biology. I've had businesses before, including a medical writing business, and I'm now a certified Natural Advantage productivity coach. I'm also the co-founder of a network of science and medical writers in the Netherlands and the Benelux area. You may find me on different podcasts, giving interviews about my work, or you might come across one of my guest blogs. I've been featured in places like the European Medical Writers Association, the Making Money Online podcast, and Marie TV. So, as a former scientist, I tend to be a little analytical about things, but I also love to break things down into simple elements. And I always look for the lesson from the experiences that I've had. So if that's not your thing, then this podcast probably isn't for you. I'm just putting it out there. It's okay to say, no, thank you, not right now. Listen to this podcast if you're starting out as an entrepreneur, you're an introvert, and you're trying to take that step or trying to build your business in those first couple of years. Maybe you find yourself doubting your capabilities from time to time, or you're not sure what to do first. Or maybe you're a little bit further down the line and you already have a business that you love, but something is a little bit off. Maybe you don't feel a connection with your work like you used to, or maybe your work has started to kind of like take over your life and you're missing that work-life balance. Or you're trying to get to the next level and you realize that you're going to need to shift some things in the way that you work to be able to take that next step. So taking these steps is entirely possible for every single one of us. And small tweaks in the way that we work can already have a huge impact. You can have work that you love, that has an impact, that you're excited to get up for in the morning, while having a thriving family life and still take care of yourself and your needs. So if this speaks to you, then I welcome you into the Productive Introvert community, and I invite you to listen to episode 1 right now. Thank you for listening to the Productive Introvert Community Podcast. If you're an introverted entrepreneur and you're ready to thrive in your own way, then connect with me on thefrankermessage.com/contact.